Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Vamily Show, Season 3, Episode number 9. I'm here with Marc Johnston, and he is one of the co-founders of High Thrive Coaching, and you can find them at highthrivecoaching.com. Now, you do a podcast, and you got a blog there. You do coaching, and it's marriage coaching rather than counseling. I think would be a better way to say it. Is that
Bob? I'm not sure if you're cut in and out there a little bit.
I was asking. It's more like it's not counseling. It's more like coaching, marriage coaching.
Yes. So the difference there being, I remember when I was in graduate school, and the teachers would tell me, "Okay, don't tell your clients what to do," and that's a very counseling sort of approach. You lead your client in kind of the direction, and the goals are very directed by the client. Whereas coaching, it's more like, hey, okay, here's this problem. This is what you're going to do. Next, do this. Next, do that. And that's much more our approach.
Right. And people come to you when they have issues, and you try to help them get back on the right track. Is there any of your stories that you can recall where you thought, man, I don't know if even we can get this worked out, and you ended up having a success story out of it?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the name of the game for us. Our specific niche that we've created, we help individuals whose marriages are right there at the edge of divorce, and we try to help them patch things back together to the point where their spouse gets on board and wants to work with us as well. So we have situations where, like, just the husband or the wife is coming in and their spouse is having an affair, and they're saying they're completely done, and we turn those around. I'm specifically remembering one client. She came in, and her husband moved in with the other woman, had been living there for a couple months, and she said, okay, well, what do we do about this? And in many cases, so on top of that, he's saying, we're going to divorce. He filed for divorce. In many cases, a lot of counselors, even those who specialize in relationships, would say, well, that's over. And when we took a look at it, there were some simple things that she could do to turn it around. She was panicking and getting very desperate and getting very clingy. So when we adjusted a few things and helped her really address his concerns, he got much more comfortable with her, and then they had an easier time spending some time together. And then after all that, he kind of said, what am I doing? Do I really need to leave my wife and family when it's really not that bad anymore?
Right. And I kind of wanted to talk to you about how you prepare to be in a relationship again. I've kind of realized that I want to work out myself quite a bit. So what are some things that you would suggest to people that are out there that are single and they'd like to get into a relationship that leads to marriage? What are some things they should avoid when they're in the dating stage before they even get to the seriousness of marriage?
Well, I think there are certainly some red flags to avoid. Especially things like if there are concerns or needs that get brought up and those are shut down, that's a big red flag to me. I think that one of the big things that breaks down a marriage over time is this inability to give and receive feedback. A lot of people will say, okay, it's about communication, and yes, that's a big part of it. But it's this ability, can I go to my partner and make bids for things that I need and have those things addressed? So in a dating scene, you're going to see this a little bit differently, because you don't have all this history and whatnot together, but can you go to your dating partner and say, hey, this is something really interesting to me. Can we go check this out? I know that's not your thing. And a really healthy dating relationship, there's a lot of give and take that is able to go on in that sort of arena. Or can you go to your dating partner and say, hey, this is something that's really uncomfortable to me, and they take time to listen and address those concerns and perhaps make some adjustments. Those are the what I would say, if you have some ability to do that, there's a lot of room and flexibility to handle other problems. So uh, just as a very basic foundation, that's one of the things that you should be looking for.
Okay. And if you find those, what are some ways to, I guess, provide that feedback and take the feedback, and ways to communicate that help avoid hurt feelings, and
Mhm.
help avoid running into bigger issues, I guess I should say.
So, essentially, like you're asking, if you provide that feedback, how do you avoid hurting the other person's feelings? What's funny is I was actually just talking with some clients about this, um, and the couple that I'm referring to, one of the problems is, when feedback is given, there tended to be a lot of defensiveness, and someone's, like, so I'm not doing that to you, and what
Right.
was happening is the feedback was getting shut down. Typically, what I suggest in those scenarios is that you approach these needs um, with a lot less emphasis on what's going wrong, and you provide solutions. And if you're hearing some feedback, you find ways to say yes. So, as
Right.
an example, if I were to go to my wife and really need something from her, I wouldn't say, "You're you never listen to me, and you're not, you're always focusing on other people." Hypothetically, as a point of feedback, I'd say, "Hey, I really need some attention. I'm missing you, and I want to feel close to you. How can we make this work?" It's this allowance for a path for them to actually do something good in the relationship. That makes it a lot easier. And almost, it's very rare that you find someone where if you say, "Hey, I appreciate that you do this, and I'm looking for to feel closer to you, and I'm looking to have this better feeling with you. How can we make this happen?" It's very rarely rejected when framed in that way. And if it is, then there's something that needs to be examined a little bit more closely.
Right. And when you what got you into deciding that you wanted to um, do this as a career and go into helping people in their marriages? Was it experience with your own marriage that led to you deciding that you wanted to help others?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, I've been interested in just mental health for quite some time. I mean, I've been in mental health as an industry for almost 15 years now. But specifically with relationships, it became a bit more of a priority as I moved through school and whatnot. So I came from a very large family. There's 8 kids in my family. I'm one of the younger ones. And family was just a really important thing growing up. And so by the time I was hitting college and starting to study psychology, some of my older siblings were having marriage problems of their own. And, I got married while I was attending my undergraduate program. And I saw my siblings who were going through divorce or having marriage problems. And I was like, okay, I don't want that. That sounds really yucky to me. And I went into psychology thinking, okay, well, how do I use my education or my career to better my own life? I very much looked at it in that way. And so I became more interested in how do healthy families, how do healthy relationships look? What do they look like? And so that became some of the focus of my research papers, or as I was choosing classes. It really became a focus about 5 or 6 years ago. when, I decided to go into business for myself. And, it kind of resurfaced this really strong interest in how healthy families and relationships work. And so I just saw that there was a really big need out there for these dire cases, because a lot of times they were turned away. They said, okay, there's nothing that can be done. And I like to think, hey, if someone really wants to work on something, if someone wants to improve themselves, even if it's a really dire circumstance, they should have some support for that.
Right. And have you noticed that the earlier people come to you for coaching, you've been able to head off a lot of issues that you've seen coming in other couples?
Oh, of course, yeah. I wish people would come in a lot sooner than they do, but the unfortunate tendency that at least here in the U.S. or actually just really anywhere, because we see clients around the world. We do it all online, and we have clients in Australia and the UK.
Right.
But the tendency is to not seek out help until you're basically, in terms of mental health or relationship help, you're in need of intensive care, or you're basically dying, as far as the relationship goes. And honestly, if I do get those comments, they're like, well, this is all great and it's helped a lot, but if I had just come in a year earlier, this would have been so much easier to work around.
Right. And I kind of wonder if because I've worked on cars before and all that kind of stuff. So is it a good idea almost to, if you're going to get married to a person, to almost do like a preventative maintenance thing and come see somebody like you, and get some coaching to get those skills in the toolbox before you even get married?
I think that would be really wise, depending on who you go to. So I can recall, working in just a regular general counseling office, and looking back, I don't think there was anyone there that necessarily specialized in marriages or relationships. And if you went there, a lot of times our mental health programs are really focused on sickness. Like, okay, is there anything wrong? How do we fix what's wrong? And if you went in as a preventative measure, I think a lot of people who do not specialize specifically in relationships would take a look at that and say, well, why are you here? But if you went to someone specific, specific who that's their specialty, there's certainly a lot that could be done to evaluate, okay, are there any problems? Are there any things that are going to develop into something bigger? Like I said, though, the unfortunate thing is there's so much of a focus on sickness. Like my wife and I, we attended a pre-marriage class ourselves. Like I said, it was a really important thing for myself and my wife. But looking back, it wasn't that good. It was kind of it was through our church, and they were really well-meaning, well-intentioned, but it was run by volunteers, and they were following a booklet. And you really have to, if you want to be serious about it, you have to go to someone who knows what they're doing.
Right. Is there anything that you've learned over the years of being married that wasn't in any of the books that you've written, and you've taken and used it to help coach other people?
Oh, there's plenty of things that I wouldn't have really thought to apply. I mean, of course, there's the really common theories. I know a lot of people are familiar with like love languages, which wasn't something that I was even aware of until about 5 years into my marriage. My wife and I, we've been married now 15 years. But
Congratulations. Yeah, that's quite a feat to last that long, especially nowadays.
well, the thing is, we actively try to maintain it and do well with it. So it's not like, oh, it's 15 years. Like, I'm honestly, after this interview, I'm done with the day. I'm excited to go down and speak with my wife, and
Right.
that's where we're at. anyways,
by the way, I never understood that when guys, and you've probably been around them at different places you worked at, maybe where they're like, "Oh, I got to go home to the wife," and then I was like, I don't understand why, if you're that upset to go home to your wife, like, why did you marry her? Like, you would think, if and maybe some guys do that just to, put up a facade or whatever too. But for me, it's like, I've never, if I'm ever with somebody, it's never like, oh man, I gotta go. And if I ever start to feel that way, then that's when I want to end that relationship and not get married to that person, because
there's
that's a
something
sign
wrong
for me.
there. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I lost my train of thought. The original question was, it was
things that you take from your
yes.
marriage and apply them.
So one of the things, as an example, that's actually something I really like to do. Taking areas, other theories that weren't originally applying to relationships and applying them to that. So one of my recent finds that I've become really interested in is the Enneagram personality theory. Now, I don't normally like personality theories, but I happen to really like this one as it describes key fears and motivations, and it describes its relationships to the other personality types. And so what I've been able to do is, because it really describes that well, it says, hey, this type of person, their motivations are here and their fears are here, and it allows me to then take my client who might not understand why their spouse is acting a certain way and say, hey, here's how you can support them really well.
Right.
So I mean, this is one example, but we could probably talk for a good hour on
Oh
all
yeah.
the
Oh yeah,
all the little
easily. Is there anybody that you'd like to have on your podcast and get information from, maybe about how they deal with marriage that you haven't talked to? Or is there anyone, because I listened to the first one, and
Mhm.
with your co-founder there, and I guess co-host on the podcast as well,
Yeah.
and about the struggles that she went through. But and then I listened to some of your most recent one, and you answer questions on your podcast on there. So have there been any ones that you've had difficulty maybe getting through too? Like they were like real tearjerkers for you, either happy or sad, that you shared on the podcast?
You're talking about who I would like to have on the podcast
Yeah,
and
yeah,
things. Um, in terms of like tear jerkers, my tendency is, I don't know what I've done, been able to put up some sort of wall. Like, I really care about, say, the clients and their outcomes, but I think I've gotten to a really healthy place with that, so that if there's really sad situations, which I have to deal with quite often, I'm able to step away at the end of the session and not really be hugely impacted. And I think it's highly important to have that skill in dealing with really sad situations. Otherwise, it would tear me apart at the end of the day. There's certainly clients that I would have loved to interview, because we had some really great turnaround stories. And there's certainly really sad situations that, if they had just done something, a little bit different, that we could have turned around. But in terms of people I would, just like to have on my podcast, of course, we all have, heroes and people that we like to listen to and look up to. Um, in terms of like personal development, I really like, people like Tony Robbins, or I really actually have just been eating up all the material from Jordan Peterson, if you're familiar with him. I've
yeah.
been really enjoying him lately. But there's all sorts of people that I would love to in my dream podcast episode.
Right. And it is, since or you dealt with mental health for so long, I kind of want to ask you, is it good to spend your time consuming material like that that is good and help you create some new neural pathways in your mind to think about motivational stuff
Mhm.
and stuff that can help you out. Is that something that's good to spend your time on?
Oh, I'm chuckling to myself. I'm like kind of even surprised. It's a question. Of course it is. I
Right.
mean, like the I, going along with like things like Tony Robbins. I don't know if you're familiar with this stuff. He very much is this kind of law of attraction sort of person, and I like those ideas. And kind of the idea is that you are going to you're going to attract into your life the kind of things that you spend your time on. I mean, that's a very simplified version of it. But if you're spending your time studying positive things and enlightening things, the you're going to be that much more likely to see those sort of things in your life. I mean, we could talk about this scientifically.
Right.
Just in terms of neuroanatomy, your brain likes to automate stuff, and if you keep doing something new over and over again, your brain says, "Okay, I don't want to spend as much energy thinking about this. I better just, you know, make a better pathway for being happy if you're practicing being happy or
Okay.
whatever it happens to be." So yeah, it's um, going back to what I was saying earlier. Like I went into psychology because I wanted a profession that could improve my life personally. And this is very much how I approach this is I like to study these things because it makes my life better.
Right.
I
I,
study
I like to ask
family.
questions about them because I'm really interested in them. So that's
Yeah,
that's that's why I ask.
yeah, I study family stuff because I want my family to be better. And then, so it very much served like this is a priority for me because I highly value my marriage and family, and so I want that to do well. So I go in that direction. No, I understand, Bob. Like you probably got it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was more of a question for the audience
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
whatnot. But yeah.
And is there anything that you learned in school like that while you were going through it that just like clicked right away? Like, oh, that makes sense that I have that issue, or that makes sense now why I think that way, where you didn't quite understand it completely before.
I'm sure there's many examples of that. So my educational background, a lot of my teachers came from there's different theoretical backgrounds in psychology, and the vast majority of my teachers were, uh, had a cognitive behavioral therapy background. What's interesting though, one of my teachers had what's called a Rogerian or a person-centered sort of background, which is very much like tuning in with feelings and focus on those sort of things. I actually dismissed a lot of that previously because, like I said, a lot of my teachers had more of this clinical cognitive behavioral therapy background, which is the prevalent therapy model these days. But
Mhm.
as I've gotten more and more into like the family and relationship side of things, um, I can see that different theories I think apply better to different situations, and so whereas everything very much made sense, like cognitive behavioral therapy is like you think this way and you can adjust thoughts this way and you try to adjust behaviors this way, and it just clicked. It made everything very easy to fit together and say, okay, it's almost like this machine. That was
Mhm.
great. It clicked, and it helps me to look at emotions, thoughts, and behavior in a very easy way. And now that I'm a little bit much more focused in on emotions and empathy and all of these other things, it very much clicks there in this setting with relationships and family settings.
And does working on empathy, does that improve a lot of relationship issues? As if you can be more empathetic and put yourself in the other person's position, does that cut off a lot of issues from steamrolling into bigger ones?
Um, so just naturally from my profession, I tend to value empathy a bit more, and sometimes I have to ask myself that very question. I have to ask myself, okay, is this really the be all end all? And for myself, I tend to use a lot of empathy to my advantage, either in my marriage or my practice, and it works well. I do think that there are certain personality types where that's not necessarily their strength, but they can still have very healthy relationships. But I do think in almost all circumstances, a healthy dose of respect, consideration, and empathy does provide for a really strong foundation for a relationship.
Right. And how many, because I'm curious to find out this one, how many issues have you had people come in there for, and you go through all the sessions and you keep talking to them, and eventually you boil it down and find out it was something as simple as they don't take out the garbage enough, or they don't do the dishes enough, or just some chore, and that just set that person off because of some issue that they had. And once they had something simple like that worked out, the other stuff kind of fell into place.
Well, I would like to say that, like, it sounds like great to have like this one hidden thing that if as soon as we adjust this, everything clicks into place. But things like the garbage not being taken out, or not going out on enough dates, or whatever it happened, not snuggling good enough, or something like
Right.
that. That in and of itself isn't typically what's important. It's what they represent. And so, like, not taking out the garbage, it's probably much more significant to this person because it means, they might create the significance that it means this person doesn't care about me because they're not taking out the garbage. And usually the garbage, as the hypothetical example, is just one instance of this greater meaning. So they don't care about me because they don't take out the garbage, but they also didn't listen to me at this moment. And, when I wanted to tell them about my day, they just, wanted to play video games or watch TV. And usually you're going to find a lot of common, like a lot of different things that are evidence of this deeper significance. And this is one of the things that we focus on, is we say, okay, what are these root problems? Like, I don't feel significant. And then, like, how does that branch out and cause all these other problems and concerns within the relationship? So it's much more about that. And very rarely do I find that one little thing that says, oh, well, they weren't taking out the garbage. Just take out the garbage and everything's fixed.
Right. But it's you're able to find what the bigger issues are sometimes from those little issues.
Oh no, that's exactly right. I love finding examples like that. Like, oh, they don't take out the garbage, because then, as odd as it sounds, I can have this big, significant conversation about garbage.
Right.
And
Right.
because, like I said, it means something bigger than that specific example.
Right. And
Nope.
you get
I lost you for about 5 seconds or so. I finished my thought, and then I
okay.
didn't hear anything after that.
Okay. If you could give somebody a toolkit of like 2 or 3 things that are good things to do in a relationship, what are those that you would suggest to people to do?
That's a good question. I do think that number one, if you're trying to have a healthy relationship, you need to invest time into the relationship, however that might be. I mean, there are some general recommendations. They tend to vary a little bit, but anywhere from about 5 to 10 hours is a week is, I would say, where you want to be. Now, it does not have to be like 5 to 10 hours at a time, but an hour here, an hour there. But that would be number one. And I almost invariably, if a couple comes to me and says we're just we don't have any connection, immediately what comes to my mind is, okay, are they actually investing in the relationship? Do they have time together? And almost always they don't. They've gotten too consumed with their jobs or the kids or their own personal hobbies. I would say that the second tool that or in their toolkit that they should really consider is to not sweep problems under the rug. Concerns, problems need to be resolved. And I think a lot of people fear that if you fight or argue about things, that this is a really terrible thing. And I don't think that there should be a ton of arguing or anything, but referring to John Gottman, who's like the big name in terms of marriage research. Like if you're not familiar with him, he did this monumental like 20-year study of marriages and got really good at predicting who would divorce and who wouldn't. But he talks about the most important skill in a relationship is the ability to repair, not prevent problems so much, because you're going to have problems. But he says you need to be able to repair problems, which means, in my mind, you need to not sweep things under the rug. You need to actually address things.
Right.
And I think that further segues into a little bit what I talked about earlier, is there needs to be an ability to make bids for your needs, an ability to give and receive feedback. If you have those few things, if you're investing time, if you have really good repair skills, and you can have an ability to make bids for your needs, you're going to very likely have a very strong relationship. Bob? No?
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I lost you again.
I'm starting to have connection issues, and that's all right. We're already at 30 minutes, so I definitely want to have you on again to talk some more.
I'd love to.
And get some more of your thoughts, and maybe by then I'll be ready to be in a relationship, and then I can kind of talk to you about the starting points of relationships and how you go through that, because at least I think I'm asking the right questions to where I'm starting to be prepared for something like that. So I appreciate you being on, and it's highthrivecoaching.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go there, you can sign up for coaching, you can get sessions and all that kind of stuff with you. I'm sure you, especially right now with everything you do, the telehealth type stuff, and do it over the internet.
Well, we've been doing that for years. So when the pandemic hit, it was just like, oh, this is just another Tuesday.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And is there anything that you'd like to let people know about the coaching that you have going on right now that might be something special?
Well, so if people, what I'd like to say is, if people are even slightly considering it, there are certainly ways they can dip their toes in the water. We have a lot of different kinds of packages. I know one of the ones that some people like to do to just introduce themselves to it. We have online courses, things like that. Some of them get into the program and they just want to attend. We have group sessions every day of the week, and they just want to attend those to start off at. But don't sit around and wait on the problems. If you need to even just get a little bit of direction, like, okay, is this something I really need to be worried about, I would check it out sooner rather than later. And we have options for that. Just go to our website, the www.highthrivecoaching.com/apply. Right there's a free consultation.
Awesome. Check it out, guys. And like I always say in my show, stop waiting for life to happen and make it happen. And you made it happen with your own consulting company and everything else. And if you want to stick with me, I'll play the credits, and we'll get out of here next episode for sure.
Right.